Hey everyone, Rob Miller here, and welcome back to the channel. Now, I'm going to start today's story by being completely honest with you. It's a confession, really, about a place I found myself in life, a place that many of you, especially those of you who've been married for a long time, might recognize. It's a place of quiet, predictable comfort, but one where a certain spark, a certain energy, had just faded. My name is Rob Miller. I'm 52 years old, and I've been married to my wife, Sarah, for 24 years. Sarah is a fantastic woman. She works as a site supervisor at a local public service firm, which is a tough job, but she handles it with grace and competence. Our kids are grown up now. They've flown the nest, which means it's just the two of us rattling around in a house that suddenly feels a little too big and a little too quiet. That quiet, ironically, is what started to get to me. Lately, I've been spending more and more time staring at my smartphone in the middle of the night. It's not because I'm a night owl. Trust me, after a long day at the office, all I really want is to be asleep by 10 p.m. But for some reason, when I laid down, the sleep just wouldn't come. My mind would race, or I'd just find myself scrolling, trying to find some digital distraction until sheer exhaustion finally won. And right next to me, my wife, Sarah, would be lying there, perfectly still, radiating a kind of silent disapproval. That's how I perceived it. Anyway, a quiet simmering of annoyance that I was keeping the room lit, however dimly, with my phone screen. I remember thinking, when did that kind of easy, connected intimacy with Sarah stop? The kind where just being in the same room was enough, where we'd whisper about our day until we both drifted off. Now it felt like a gulf, a silent canyon, was growing between our two sides of the bed. Our daily exchange was practically a script we memorized. Good work, thank you, and good night. That's it. Those were the bookends to our days. As family, as partners, there was no major problem. We managed a house. We paid the bills. We attended family functions together. We were a functional unit. But as a man and a woman, as lovers, that part of our relationship had been on extended, unacknowledged sabbatical for years. Then came the night everything shifted. I was deep down the rabbit hole of news articles on my smartphone, a deep dive into some minor political scandal, the kind of thing you instantly forget the next morning. And there was a small, unassuming ad banner at the bottom of the screen. It was for an adult partner swapping service called Couple Switch. Now, my initial reaction was pure skepticism. Honestly, I thought, this has to be some kind of scam, right? A honey trap, a suspicious site meant to fleece lonely guys, or worse. But for some strange, almost magnetic reason, I couldn't look away. My thumb hovered, and then, a little reluctantly, I clicked. The website was slicker than I expected. It didn't have the cheap, lurid feel of a typical shady adult site. It presented itself as a sophisticated, boutique service. The pitch was aimed squarely at people exactly like Sarah and me, a safe matching service for older, established couples. The messaging was clear. Mutual consent brings new excitement. And, crucially, complete anonymity ensures peace of mind. I was glued to the screen. I kept reading, scrolling through the FAQs in the About Us section. It was, indeed, what's commonly known as a spouse swapping or swinging service. But they presented it as a way for couples who had settled into a rut to responsibly and safely explore a new dimension of their relationship, a kind of extreme, shared marital adventure. What really caught my attention was the emphasis on safety and legitimacy. Registration requires the explicit, documented consent of both spouses. This wasn't some arrangement for cheating. It was a mutual decision. Identity verification is thorough, requiring several forms of ID to ensure everyone is who they say they are, and that they are, in fact, a married couple. The monthly fee wasn't cheap. It was clearly priced to deter casual, non-serious users and, frankly, to fund the high level of security and vetting they advertised. I couldn't take my eyes off my phone. I remember muttering to myself, a whisper so low Sarah wouldn't hear it over the quiet with the air conditioning. I can't believe I'm even thinking about something like this. Yet, the thought had taken root. It was like a forbidden door had opened just a crack, letting in a draft of exhilarating, terrifying possibility. I didn't know what I was looking for, but the idea of something new, something that might shock life back into the comfortable stagnation of my marriage, was intoxicating. The next day, I was completely preoccupied. I couldn't concentrate on a single spreadsheet at work. That night, after Sarah got home from her site, and we'd had a quiet, scripted dinner, I knew I had to talk to her. This wasn't something I could just sign us up for. It required her full, informed consent. But how on earth do you casually bring up the subject of wife swapping to your wife of 24 years? I waited until she was doing the dishes, a moment of predictable domesticity that felt safe. I swallowed hard, taking a deep breath to steady the nervousness in my stomach. Sarah, I started, my voice sounding strained and a little too loud in the kitchen. I have something I really need to talk to you about. She turned, towel in hand, wiping a plate. What, Rob? About work. Sarah is 50 years old. She's always had this calm, self-possessed beauty. She usually works as a site supervisor, but on days when her primary project is running itself, she often picks up shifts at a supermarket for a change of pace. She's serious, dependable, and incredibly kind, a fundamentally good person. No, it's not about work, I said, walking closer, leaning against the counter. It's about us, about our marriage. She stopped drying the dish and slowly turned to face me completely. The full focus of her calm, assessing gaze was unnerving. About us? What is it, Rob? You're making me nervous. I tried to ease into it, using the language of the website, trying to make it sound like a theoretical concept. How do you think things are going lately? I asked, gesturing vaguely between us. How are things going for us as a couple? I mean, really? Sarah thought for a long moment, tapping the towel against the ceramic plate. Her answer was typical Sarah, honest, practical, and a little resigned. I don't think it's bad, Rob. There aren't any particular problems. We're fine. We're stable. I know there aren't any problems, she trailed off, then fixed me with a knowing look. But I'm at a loss for words, honestly. What are you actually trying to say, Rob? Just tell me. There was no more room for subtlety. I felt my face flush. Actually, there's this service, this kind of arrangement, I explained, timidly turning my smartphone screen toward her. I held my breath, watching her expression as she scanned the web page for a couple switch. She looked from the phone back to me. Her initial reaction wasn't anger or disgust, but surprise. She didn't say the word, wife swapping. Instead, she just blinked and asked, "Is that really a thing?" I nodded quickly. Apparently it is. It's a mutually consenting couples exchanging partner service. And this one seems proper. They have solid safety measures, thorough verification. Sarah stared at me in silence, her expression unreadable. I waited, the silence stretching out until it felt suffocating. My heart was pounding like a drum against my ribs. Finally, I managed to say the words I'd been rehearsing in my head all day. Sarah, I wanted to try it. I know it sounds crazy, but if you wouldn't mind, and if I didn't mind, just to see, to experience something new, that's it. She took the phone from my hand, scrolling through the site, reading the language of safety, consent, and mutual exploration. She was silent for a long, drawn-out time. I felt the hope I hadn't realized I was harboring begin to dwindle. I was convinced she was about to shut the whole idea down with a single, firm refusal. Then she looked up, her eyes holding a complex mix of shock, curiosity, and emotion I couldn't quite name. I'd never imagined you'd suggest something like this, Rob. Never in a million years. I figured as much. But if that's what you're thinking, she said, a small, tentative smile touching the corner of her lips, then let me think about it. I need to process this. I couldn't sleep that night. I was a mess of anxiety and a flicker of hope. The fact that Sarah hadn't given me a flat-out, immediate no was a victory I never anticipated. I spent the next 3 days in a kind of purgatory, rereading the Couple Switch website, half hoping she would forget about it, half praying she would say yes. Finally, 3 days later, as we were having our morning coffee, she looked up from her mug and simply said, "Let's try it." My heart leaped. "Really?" "Yes," she confirmed, her voice firm. "But there are conditions. I've been thinking about this a lot. We need boundaries, Rob." "What are they?" "Name anything," I said, leaning forward. "First, we don't talk about each other in detail after the fact. No graphic details. We focus on our own experiences and how they affect us. And second," she continued, her gaze steady, "only once, one time. This is an experiment, not a lifestyle change. We see what it brings out in us, and then we put it to rest." "Okay," I agreed instantly. "I can absolutely agree to those terms. No details, and one time only. Are you sure about this, though? Are you confident about the safety of the service?" Sarah nodded slightly. "I looked at the website after you showed me. It does seem solid. They are very clear on their rules and vetting process. Okay, Rob, let's register." And just like that, The quiet, predictable life of Rob and Sarah Miller was about to be turned upside down. All right, so Sarah was in. That, honestly, was the biggest hurdle. I had braced myself for arguments, for tears, for the what about our marriage conversation. Instead, I got a pragmatic, conditional let's try it. It showed me a side of Sarah I hadn't seen in years, a capacity for risk and a quiet, almost academic curiosity about the human condition, even her own. The next day, we sat down together at the kitchen table, our laptop between us, to execute the plan. It felt less like a clandestine affair and more like filing our taxes, just with a much higher emotional stakes. Creating the profiles on Couple Switch was an exercise in introspection, and honestly, a little awkward. We started with the basics. Rob, 52, site supervisor. Sarah, 50, public service supervisor. We debated what to put in our About Us section. We couldn't exactly write. We're in a stable but sexually stagnant, quarter-century marriage looking for a mutually agreed-upon spark. We settled on something more YouTube-friendly, something conversational and honest, yet discreet. We wrote that we were a long-married couple, financially secure and professionally established, whose children were now independent. We explained that we were seeking a new, shared experience to deepen our appreciation for each other and explore fun, consensual adventure outside the confines of daily routine. We emphasized our commitment to discretion and the one-time, exploratory nature of our quest. Then came the photos. This was surprisingly difficult. The service required recent, clear photos of each partner individually that clearly showed our faces for identity verification, but also allowed for a couple's photo that would be visible to other users. We chose a nice picture from a recent vacation. Us smiling, relaxed, looking like the solid, slightly boring couple we were. But the individual photos had to convey a different message. I uploaded a photo of myself in a blazer, looking competent and trustworthy, a classic daddy figure vibe, I suppose. Sarah, however, chose a photograph that truly surprised me. She was wearing a simple, tailored black dress, leaning against a wall, a gentle, knowing smile on her face. The angle and the lighting brought out her eyes and the elegant line of her neck. It wasn't overtly sexual, but it was absolutely sensual. She looked calm, beautiful, and utterly available to new possibilities. Wow, Sarah, I remember saying, genuinely impressed. That's a great photo. You look incredible. She just shrugged, but her cheeks held a faint pink. Well, if we're doing this, Rob, I'm not going looking like someone's tired old librarian, am I? It was a small victory for her self-image, and it made me realize how much she, too, craved to be seen again, not just as mom or the boss, but as a desirable woman. The next section was about specifying our niche criteria, the attributes we were looking for in a prospective partner couple. This is a crucial concept in the world of specialized dating platforms, and here it defines the parameters of the exchange. I was looking for a woman in her late 40s to early 50s. I didn't care about her occupation. That wasn't the point. I specified that I was drawn to a woman who projected warmth and confidence. I remember typing in, someone who looks like they still enjoy being seen. That was a desire boiling up in me, to be with a woman who knew she was attractive and wasn't afraid to own it. Sarah's criteria were more detailed, more specific, and again revealing. She wanted a man her age or slightly older, who seemed honest and genuine. But then she added a surprising detail. She wanted a man who liked cleanliness and order. I asked her about it. Why that detail, Sarah? Because, she explained patiently, it speaks to control, to maturity, and to respect. A man who cares about his environment likely cares about the environment of others. I don't want a messy, chaotic energy, Rob. I want someone calm, someone who appears to be a gentleman. Her criteria were less about raw passion and more about a feeling of safety and respectful consideration, which made perfect sense. She was still Sarah, after all. The platform's mandatory identity verification process was indeed thorough. We had to submit copies of our passports, a utility bill showing the same address, and even a copy of our marriage certificate, something I hadn't looked at in 20 years. We then had a brief video call with a platform representative, a quick check to ensure we were the people in the photos, and that we both verbally confirmed our mutual consent to join the service. It was professional, clinical, and completely deromanticized the process, which paradoxically made it feel safer and more legitimate. The next week was a strange period of waiting. We continued our normal routine, but there was an underlying tension, a secret share between us. We occasionally look at each other with a new question in our eyes. Did we really do that? Are we actually going through with this? Finally, a week later, I got the email notification. My heart stuttered. We had a match. I immediately showed Sarah. The platform had used an algorithm based on our age ranges, express interests, and geographical location to propose a compatible couple. The matches were the Anderson couple. The husband, Andrew, was 48 years old and he worked in sales. The wife, Victoria, was 46 years old and listed as a full-time housewife. We eagerly opened their profile. Andrew's photo showed a man with an easy smile and sharp eyes, looking relaxed in a polo shirt. He had a clean-cut, successful air about him, but it was Victoria who commanded attention. Victoria's profile picture was a headshot, and she was indeed quite beautiful. She had striking, intelligent eyes, dark hair, and a very confident, almost sultry look. She was impeccably put together, radiating an aura of polished sophistication. "Well, Rob," Sarah said, leaning in, "she's stunning, isn't she?" Definitely ticks the enjoys being seen box. There was no jealousy in her voice, only a detached, appreciative observation. I, meanwhile, was assessing Andrew's profile. His reply also had a calm, manly air, and his bio spoke of a love for travel and fine dining. "So you decided on these two?" Sarah asked, scrolling through their profile details one last time. "What do you think? Victoria is beautiful." I admitted, meeting her eyes, testing her reaction. "She is," Sarah agreed, "and she seems very self-possessed." "That's good. She's not fragile." "And what do you think of Andrew, Sarah?" I asked, a tiny flicker of protective jealousy I hadn't expected surfacing. She paused, considering him. "He seems safe, like he's got it together. He's professional. His description of himself is polite and straightforward. I don't think he's bad at all, Rob. He meets my criteria for being honest and clean-cut." The platform facilitated the initial contact, sending a mutually approved introductory message. Andrew replied within the hour. His communication was impeccable, formal but warm. He suggested a meeting, adhering to the platform security protocol. Meet in a public, neutral space first. We agreed to meet the following Saturday at a hotel in Tokyo. The logistics were clinical and non-negotiable. We each booked separate rooms in the same hotel, and the plan was to swap keys and partners after a brief group introduction. This separation, the physical evidence of the exchange, made the whole thing feel more official, more like a contract. As the appointed Saturday approached, I became a bundle of nerves. It was like I was preparing for a job interview that could redefine my entire life. Is this really okay? The questions cycled in my head endlessly. We can't quit now, can we? To my astonishment, Sarah was surprisingly calm. She went about her week with her usual efficiency, even getting her hair styled the day before our meeting. "Aren't you nervous, Sarah?" I asked her Friday night as she laid out a particularly elegant-looking outfit. "Of course I am, Rob," she said, folding a silk blouse. "My heart's been doing flips all day, but I'm also looking forward to it." "Looking forward to it?" I repeated, slightly dumbfounded. She turned to me, her eyes bright with that rediscovered curiosity. "Yes, I am. It's a new experience, Rob. A completely uncharted territory. It's terrifying, but that's the definition of an adventure, isn't it? To see what the world and what I look like when the rules are fundamentally changed, even for a night." Sarah's words surprised me deeply. I had always seen her as the anchor, the grounded, conservative force in our relationship, but she was revealing herself to be an adventurer. Too, just one whose thirst for exploration had been deeply buried by the demands of family and career. She was eager to see if she could still evoke desire, if she could still connect with someone on a primal level after so many years of the polite, domesticated version of love. That Friday night, she took my hand across the dinner table. "We made a pact, Rob. One night, no going back on the agreement. No details. We go in, we see what we learn, and we come back stronger. Trust me." Her calmness was my stabilizer. I looked at my wife, this woman who was stepping into the unknown with me, not out of malice or spite, but out of a need for self-discovery, and I felt a surge of love and respect for her that had been missing in the dull routine of our daily life. This shared, incredible secret was already changing us, even before we stepped into that hotel lobby. On Saturday afternoon, we headed separately to the hotel, driving our own cars to keep the separation clear. We were scheduled to meet Andrew and Victoria in the main lobby first, the introductory phase before the exchange. I walked into the grand, hushed marble lobby of the downtown hotel, my palms sweating, feeling like a teenager on a first date. I was about to meet the woman who would be my temporary partner, and the man who would be sharing a space with my wife. The feeling was completely surreal. I stood near the check-in desk, adjusting my tie for the 10th time. The sheer formality of the setting, the crystal chandeliers, the muted conversations of business travelers, the polished marble floor, made our clandestine plan feel even more illicit. I felt a spotlight was on me, yet no one was paying any attention. This was a normal Saturday afternoon in a high-end hotel, except for the 4 people about to exchange their lives for a night. I spotted them instantly. The Andersons. Andrew was just as calm and composed as his photo suggested. He was waiting near the velvet rope by the elevator bank, looking completely at ease in a charcoal suit jacket and crisp white shirt. He looked like the kind of man who was always on a path of self-improvement, maybe a little too polished, but certainly respectful. And then there was Victoria. I had thought she was beautiful in the photos, but in person, she was even more striking. She had a confidence that radiated outward, a kind of sophisticated glamour. She was wearing a dress that was elegant, but certainly didn't hide the fact that she had an incredible figure. Her posture was perfect, and she moved with a subtle, alluring grace. She had an intensity in her eyes that made me feel instantly seen. They were waiting patiently. As the clock on my phone ticked past the appointed time, Sarah walked in a minute behind me, looking composed and professionally elegant in a navy dress. She gave me a small, tight nod, a signal that we were both committed. We walked toward them, a moment that felt less like an introduction and more like stepping across a Rubicon. Andrew was the first to react. He straightened up, a warm, genuine smile stretching across his face, and extended his hand. "You must be Rob and Sarah Miller. Nice to finally meet you." His voice was deep and steady, exactly what Sarah had hoped for, calm, masculine, and reassuring. "Nice to meet you too, Andrew," I replied, returning the firm handshake. My voice thankfully didn't crack. Sarah stepped forward immediately, shaking his hand with her usual polite directness. Andrew then turned to his wife. "This is my wife, Victoria." "I'm Victoria. It's a pleasure to meet you both," she said, extending a hand first to Sarah, then to me. Victoria's voice was the third surprise of the encounter. It was low, husky, and deeply sensual, the kind of voice that holds your attention and suggests secrets. I realized instantly that this wasn't just a physical exchange. It was a psychological one. Victoria seemed to possess an awareness of her own charm, a quiet command of the space around her. Later, I'd remember the profile mention of her past work, thinking, perhaps that history as a hostess gave her this incredible ability to make people feel simultaneously comfortable and utterly fascinated. "And this is my wife, Sarah." I introduced her. "Naoko, thank you for your hospitality," Sarah replied, maintaining her customary polite demeanor, though I could see a flicker of assessing curiosity in her eyes as she looked at Victoria. Sarah was sizing up the competition, not out of jealousy, but simply out of professional-level observation. The introductions were over. The awkwardness of the initial handshake gave way to the shared anticipation of what came next. "Shall we go to your room, then?" Victoria suggested, her voice smooth and practical, cutting to the lingering tension. She held up her room keycard. This was the moment of the actual swap. The plan was executed without fanfare. Andrew, with polite deference, handed his room key to Sarah. I, in turn, handed my key to him. The keys were exchanged, a small, quiet clinking sound sealing the pact. The partners were now separated. Andrew and Sarah headed toward one elevator bank, exchanging polite, if slightly strained, conversation. I watched them go for a split second, a strange, complex cocktail of emotions churning in my gut, jealousy, curiosity about Sarah's experience, and a sudden, sharp pang of guilt. But before I could dwell on it, Victoria's hand was lightly on my elbow. "This way, Rob." We stepped into a different elevator, just the two of us. The glass-walled car gave us a panoramic view of the lobby shrinking below, and the city lights beginning to assert themselves as dusk deepened. Being alone with her, in that confined, upward-moving space, was an instant injection of high-voltage electricity into my nervous system. My nerves, which had settled during the formal introduction, now rose immediately, a frantic buzz filling my ears. I felt like I was back in college, completely unsure what to do with my hands or where to look. Victoria, ever composed, noticed my stiffness immediately. "You seem nervous, Rob," she said, a gentle smile playing on her lips, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Yes, I am," I admitted, the truth pouring out easily because she was so disarmingly direct. "It's been a while since I've felt this way." I didn't need to finish the sentence. She understood. "I'm feeling that way, too," she confessed, turned to face me fully as the elevator continued its ascent. but I'm sure it'll be a wonderful evening. We're here to explore, aren't we? To rediscover something that routine tends to bury. The scent of Victoria's perfume enveloped me in the elevator. It wasn't overpowering, but sophisticated, sweet, mature scent that suggested vanilla and something exotic. A scent that spoke of deliberate choice and confidence. It was a sensory shock, the first truly non-Sarah sensory input I'd had in years. It immediately signaled that I was crossing a boundary. When we reached our floor, the doors opened into a quiet, carpeted hallway. She led the way to the room, unlocked the door, and we stepped inside. The room was luxurious, soft lighting, a massive bed, and a breathtaking night view of the city twinkling outside the large window. It was a perfect stage for an escape. We sat across from each other on 2 plush velvet chairs. The silence, initially awkward, was quickly broken by Victoria. "Would you like a drink, Rob?" she asked, reaching for a small, elegant travel bag she placed on the table. "I'd like a drink, please." "I think I need one." I chuckled, trying to mask my remaining tension. "I'd like one, too," she said. She produced a bottle of wine, a nice heavy red, and 2 proper wine glasses. I always find a nice wine helps the transition from the day to the night ahead. As she opened the bottle, she spoke easily, maintaining a light conversational flow. She was pouring the wine, turning the tile, and I couldn't help but stare at her hands, her long, elegant fingers. It was such a domestic, familiar action, yet everything about her made it feel charged and unfamiliar. When she handed me the glass, I looked into her eyes. They were deep and somehow mysterious, holding an intensity that suggested a lot of unspoken history and desire. "Rob, why did you choose to use this service?" she asked, her tone direct but gentle. No preamble. I took a slow sip of the wine. It was rich and warming. I wanted some excitement, some novelty. It's that simple, I suppose. I felt like my life and my marriage had become predictable to a fault. "A sense of unease in your married life, then?" she clarified, her gaze steady. "Yes, it's not unhappiness, but a quiet stagnation, an emotional flatline." She nodded slowly. "It's the same for us, the Andersons. My husband is so focused on work and success that he stopped seeing me as a woman. I'm the co-pilot in his life, not his lover. That kind of disconnect is isolating." Victoria's words resonated with an almost painful clarity. I too have begun to see my wife as a woman less and less. It's a slow erosion. She's my best friend, my partner in logistics, the mother of my children, but the man-woman aspect, that's gone. "That's probably how it is when you're together for a long time," Victoria mused, swirling the wine in her glass. "But it gets lonely, doesn't it? To be so close to someone, yet feel completely unseen as a desirable person." "It does," I whispered, the admission hitting me with the weight of years. Victoria continued sipping her wine, but then she set the glass down with decisive movement. Her eyes met mine, a playful challenge in their depth. "But not tonight, Rob. No, try to think of me as a woman tonight, and I will certainly treat you like a man." My heart started beating faster, an involuntary, powerful rhythm that sounded loud in the quiet room. The intellectual agreement and the practical planning of the last week evaporated, replaced by raw, immediate anticipation. "Yes, I also see Rob as a man," she confirmed, the affirmation ringing like a bell. She moved from her chair, gliding across the short space to mine, until she was standing right beside me. She reached out, and her hand, soft, warm, and intentional, lightly touched the back of mine, resting on the armchair. "Is that okay?" she asked, her voice barely a breath. I couldn't speak. I simply nodded, the single movement an act of complete assent. The moment her hand touched mine, something profound shifted inside me. It was like a circuit had been completed. Long-forgotten feelings were resurrected. Not just sexual desire, but the desire to connect, to be validated, to feel that potent, intoxicating energy of a new, intimate human connection. "Rob," she said, using my name with a softness that melted the tension in my shoulders. "Yes." "Please don't hold back tonight. We're here for honest experience, not polite performance." I took her hand fully, the softness of her skin against the rougher texture of mine. "Victoria," I replied, my voice steady now, resolute. "I'm not holding back either." In that moment, the last internal wall, the one built up by 2 decades of marital habit and self-censorship, crumbled. All at once, the desires of man that had been suppressed for so long began to overflow. As the magnificent night view from the window sparkled, we quietly closed the distance between us, the only sound a quiet beginning of a new, forbidden intimacy. The world outside the hotel room window, the glittering, impersonal tapestry of the city, seemed to fade away as soon as Victoria's hand enveloped mine. My sense of time blurred. The initial clinical awkwardness was replaced by a potent, almost overwhelming awareness of her presence. The soft ambient light streaming into the hotel room from the dim lamps and the distant city glow softly illuminated her features, making her skin look like warm porcelain. "You still seem a little nervous, Rob," Victoria observed, her voice barely above a whisper, laced with a mix of amusement and gentle concern. I certainly was. It wasn't the kind of nervousness I felt before presentation. It was a physical, internal tremor. It had been years since I'd been in this situation, this charged space of mutual, escalating desire with someone new, someone I was seeing, and who was seeing me purely as a man and a woman. "I'm sorry." I managed a slightly embarrassed smile on my face. "It's the unfamiliarity, I guess. It's been a while, but your patience is making me feel a little more capable, Victoria." She pulled her hand away gently and stepped back to her chair, taking another slow, appreciative sip of her wine. There was something sensual about every single one of her movements, the way her dress shifted, the slow, deliberate motion of her wrist as she raised a glass. She wasn't performing. She was simply existing in a state of confident femininity. "Are you used to this sort of thing, Victoria? You're so composed." The question slipped out, prompted by my own insecurity. She let out a soft, low laugh. "No, Rob, I'm nervous too. Terribly so. You might not look it, but you're just better at hiding your nervousness than I am. Perhaps." She paused, then corrected herself with a wry smile. "Or perhaps I'm just better at letting my nerves fuel the excitement rather than dampen it." Victoria then sat back down, not across from me this time, but on the armrest of my chair, closer than before, close enough that I could feel the subtle body heat radiating from her through the fabric of her dress. "This time, let's get closer, Rob," she said, confirming the physical intimacy that the conversation was already building. Then she asked a question that was deceptively simple, yet cut right to the core of the matter. "You love your wife, don't you?" I was taken aback by the sudden shift in focus. We were seconds away from physical intimacy, and she brought up Sarah. "I do, Victoria. Of course, I love her. Deeply. But maybe it's love as family, as partners in life. Not as a man and a woman, that's right," she pressed, her gaze intense. I nodded, acknowledging the hard truth. "That's exactly right. The romantic, physical fire has been banked for so long, I wasn't sure it could even be rekindled." Victoria nodded as if I had simply confirmed a universal law. "I feel the same way about Andrew. I love my husband. He's a good man, a dedicated father, a successful provider. But I don't really feel like he sees me as a woman anymore. I'm an accessory to his success, a beautiful fixture in his perfect life. And it makes me lonely, Rob." "I feel so lonely," she repeated, and for a fleeting moment, a sadness flashed in her eyes, not dramatic, but deep and authentic. It was a shared experience of marital isolation that transcended the superficiality of the exchange. We were two ships passing the night, both carrying the same cargo of unacknowledged emotional need. "But not tonight," she whispered, leaning in closer, the scent of her perfume a gentle cloud around us. "No." I agreed, my hand instinctively reaching to touch her hair. "Please treat me like a woman tonight. See me as Victoria, not as Mrs. Andrew Anderson." "Please," she pleaded, the word making my heart ache slightly with desire to fulfill that need. Those words warmed my heart. The plea for simple, fundamental acknowledgement. "Please treat me like a man, too, Victoria. See Rob Miller, not the tired site supervisor." "Of course," she confirmed. She took my hand again, her grip now firm and purposeful. Something changed inside me in that moment. It was as if a long-dormant male instinct, the desire to protect, to please, to possess, had been fully awakened. What should I do now? What about what happens next? I felt a sudden, childlike embarrassment. I realized I literally didn't know the etiquette, the script for this situation. I had been out of the game for too long. "I'll leave it to you," Victoria said, standing up and drawing me to my feet. "But don't act like you're a stranger in your own skin, Rob. We are sharing this moment, and that means being present. Let's be more natural." She cupped my face in her hands, her thumbs brushing my cheeks. "Can I call you Rob?" "Yes, please," I said, smiling genuinely for the first time. The moment she called me Rob, and I called her Victoria, I felt like we had established a truly special, personal relationship, separate from the roles of husband and wife we had left downstairs. She stepped back and then moved to the side table, dimming the lights in the room further, casting long shadows that made the space feel instantly more intimate and enclosed. Then, she pulled a small, elegant CD player out her bag and put on a disc. Soft, sophisticated jazz began to play. Miles Davis, perhaps, or Chet Baker. The music is probably more relaxing. Don't you think? You're right, I said, the smooth brass notes immediately lowering my internal guard. When she returned, she sat deeper next to me on the plush sofa. This time, I was close enough to feel her body heat constantly, an undeniable physical presence. What kind of work do you usually do, Rob? Tell me about your life, she asked, inviting me to talk about the man I usually was. I'm a site supervisor. Infrastructure projects mostly. It's a tough job, long hours, lots of pressure. I explained, well, you're used to it. You look like a man who works with his hands and his head. It's a manly job. It's wonderful, she murmured, and as she spoke, her hand, with an almost shocking directness, rested lightly on my thigh, her fingers gently moving higher. At that moment, I realized that for the first time in a very long time, I was being seen as a man, not as a provider, not as a father, not as a handyman, but as a man whose competence and strength were physically attractive. What did you do, Victoria? I asked, my voice a little husky. I used to work as a hostess in a very upscale club, but after I married Andrew, I became a full-time housewife, she replied, leaning into my shoulder. What was it like working as a hostess? My job was to talk to and entertain various men, to make them feel like the most important person in the room. It must have been tough, but it was also rewarding. It feels good to make people happy, Rob. Victoria's fingers, all the while, began to touch the buttons on my shirt, a delicate, methodical movement. I still love making people happy, she added, looking up at me, her eyes shining with warmth and anticipation. My heart started beating faster, echoing the rhythm of the jazz. Victoria. Yes, it's been a while for me, so please. I managed, allowing her to take the lead. I'll follow your pace. Her hands gently continued to unbutton my shirt, one by one. Is that okay? She asked softly, pulling the shirt open to reveal my chest. Yes, it's more than okay. As she worked, I gently placed my hands on her waist, pulling her closer, and then touching the soft, warm skin of her back, just below the neckline of her dress. Her skin was warmer and softer than I expected. Rob's hands are big and reliable, she murmured, leaning her head against my chest, her fingers still tracing the lines of my chest hair. They're trained through work. It's wonderful. It feels safe. Her hair smelled exquisitely feminine, a complex mix of expensive shampoo and that signature perfume. Hey, Rob, what is it? She asked, her voice turning serious for a moment. Let's keep what happens tonight just between us, exactly as Sarah asked. Of course, Victoria. That was a pact, a special shared secret. And let's cherish this moment, every second of it. No regrets. I embraced her fully, pulling her tightly against me. My heart swelled with a wave of exhilarating excitement. The feeling of embracing a woman, a new woman, for the first time in an age. Yes, Rob. Thank you. She sighed contentedly into my chest. No, Victoria. I'm the one who's thankful you see me as a man. Her voice trembled a little, betraying a crack in her composure. The night view of Tokyo stretched out beyond the window, beyond those glittering lights. Sarah must be spending time with Andrew right now. The thought brought a complicated, dizzying mix of feelings, a little jealousy, a sense of shared risk, and an unexpected freedom. I was lost in thought for a moment. Victoria, perceptive as ever, looked up at my expression and asked, A little about Sarah? Yes, I admitted. I think about my wife too, wondering if she's okay, if she's enjoying herself. It's complicated, isn't it? Victoria put her hand back on mine, squeezing lightly. Now is our time, Rob. Don't think about anything else. They're having their own experience, and we are having ours. That's right. I agreed. Follow her words. I looked into Victoria's eyes, focusing fiercely on the present moment, and my unnecessary, distracting thoughts about Sarah and Andrew gradually faded away. Rob, Victoria whispered, her voice full of warmth. I think you're beautiful. Your thoughtfulness, your earnestness. I'm happy to be here. She put her arms around my neck and kissed me. You're very attractive, too, Rob. Her words were so manly and kind, her choice of adjectives for me, that I felt a wave of humble embarrassment and deep gratitude. It had been a long time since anyone had said something like that to me, praising the qualities of my masculinity. Your wife won't tell you that anymore, will she? It's a shame. People like Rob should be cherished more, Victoria said, her words echoing the loneliness of my marriage. For me, who hadn't been acknowledged as a desirable man for a long time, her words were a profound, validating gift. As the quiet jazz continued to play, we slowly grew closer, allowing the moment to unfold without pressure or expectation. There was no need to rush. We were here to savor this moment together, an act of mutual, respectful rediscovery. The quiet persistence of the jazz, the soft lighting, the magnificent view, it all created a bubble, a space where only Victoria and I existed. We were exploring the landscape of a new, consensual intimacy, a landscape built on shared marital loneliness and a mutual desire for affirmation. We continued to kiss, slowly at first, then with increasing hunger, the kiss conveying everything the unspoken words could not. It was a long, deep kiss that tasted of red wine and desperate, rediscovered affection. As we broke apart, Victoria leaned back against the cushions, her eyes half closed. She sighed, a sound that seemed to release years of suppressed emotional weight. "It hurt," she murmured. I was instantly concerned. "Victoria, what's the matter? Did I hurt you?" I pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. She shook her head, a soft smile returning. "No, Rob. It's a good kind of hurt. A catharsis, maybe. Thank you for tonight. For just seeing me. Nothing has even started yet. And yet, I'm already happy enough." She reached out and touched my face again, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw. "Rob, you're really kind. You're so gentle and sincere. It's disarming." "Is that really so?" I asked, genuinely touched by her simple praise. I had always been known for being competent at work, but kind and sincere felt like compliments for the man beneath the supervisor's uniform. Her sincerity completely dissolved the last of my inhibition. She gently pushed my shirt completely off my shoulders and let it drop to the floor. The physical act was a clear signal. I reciprocated, gently putting my hands on the zipper of her dress. "Is it okay?" I whispered, waiting for her explicit confirmation. Consent, safety, and respect were the pillars of this experience. "Please, Rob. I want you to," she answered, leaning into my touch. The moment our skin touched, my calloused hands against the smooth, delicate skin of her back, I felt the joy of man for the first time in a long time. It was an overwhelming sense of validation. Victoria also seemed to shine as a woman in that moment, her eyes bright with eagerness and vulnerability. "Beautiful," I murmured, genuinely captivated by her. When I reached her, and we were finally skin to skin, Victoria let out a low gasp, a sound of shy yet eager surrender. "Thank you, Rob." Our breathing was the only loud sound in the room, mixing with the low hum of the jazz. I had completely forgotten about the outside world, about work, about the mortgage, about Sarah in the room down the hall. Now this moment was everything. "Rob," she whispered, clinging to me, "I'll never forget tonight. Never." "Neither will I, Victoria." We made love slowly. It wasn't a desperate, furious coupling fueled by years of frustration. It was an act of gentle, prolonged confirmation, a mutual expression of need and acknowledgement. We were carefully confirming our feelings for each other, moving with a deliberate tenderness that allowed us to truly connect. It was the first time in a very long time that I felt the warmth and softness of a woman, an intoxicating feeling that she wanted me, specifically me, Rob Miller, as a man. Everything felt fresh, new, and intensely irreplaceable. "Happy," Victoria murmured against my chest, her body slack with contentment. I held her tightly, inhaling the lingering scent of her perfume and the intimate scent of her skin. I really wanted to feel the warmth of holding her a little longer. It was a simple, profound comfort of physical closeness that had been missing most of all. Looking back, the clock on the bedside table showed it was already late at night, well past midnight. But I didn't care about the time. We just wanted to cherish this cocoon of shared intimacy. As we lay there, tangled in the sheets, Victoria suddenly looked up at me, her gaze serious. "What is it, Rob? Will we meet again?" I struggled to answer that question. It was the elephant in the room. Our original agreement, the clear boundaries Sarah had set, was for one time only. But to be honest, after this profound and validating experience, the thought of never seeing Victoria again was a sharp, unwelcome ache. "I don't know, Victoria," I admitted truthfully. The agreement with Sarah was very clear. One time. But I hope we can meet again. Even just as friends. To talk. To acknowledge this. "That's right. Victoria said, smiling a little sadly, accepting the ambiguity of the situation. Our special night continued in a cycle of quiet conversation, gentle affection, and profound intimacy. We didn't talk much about our respective spouses. We focused solely on the present, on the connection we had found. We talked about the things we miss in our lives: spontaneity, appreciation, and the simple thrill of a new perspective. As the first, faint gray morning light filtered into the room, reality began its slow, inexorable return. Victoria was quietly standing by the window, wrapped in a sheet, basking in the ethereal glow. She looked incredibly youthful and pensive. It was past 7 a.m., and the sight of the city coming to life outside the window brought a sharp jolt of awareness. Last night wasn't a dream. I still had about 3 hours until checkout time. 3 hours to transition back to Rob Miller, the husband, the site supervisor. "Good morning, Rob," Victoria whispered, turning from the window, looking effortlessly beautiful even after a fitful night of passion. "Good morning, Victoria." "I slept well, Rob. Soundly, for the first time in months." "Thank you." She sat up and looked at me, her eyes clear. "Thank you for last night. It was a truly wonderful night for me, too. You helped me remember who I am." I felt the same way. "You reminded me of feelings I had long forgotten. Victoria, it was an irreplaceable time. Shall we take a shower?" Victoria suggested, rising gracefully. "Why not together?" I asked, a new sense of boldness in my voice. She smiled and nodded. There was no need to be shy anymore. As we showered, we were still basking in the afterglow of our evening. As we washed each other's bodies, the intimacy was comforting and natural, and fueled by the remaining energy of night, we made love once again. This time, in the bright, unfiltered morning light, it felt different from the slow, tender exploration of the night. It was a joyous, energetic confirmation of our connection. Time flew by. "I don't want to leave," Victoria muttered after we got out of the shower, drying her hair with a thick white towel. "That's true. I wanted to stay with you a little longer, too. To have breakfast, to just talk." I confessed, feeling the pull of the inevitable separation. But reality doesn't wait for us. We each have our own lives to return to. As I got ready, I had mixed, swirling feelings. Last night's experience was profoundly wonderful, validating, and exciting. But the big question loomed: what will happen next? Did we leave this perfect, temporary bubble and return to our lives unchanged? Could we? "Rob," Victoria said, folding the sheet on the bed with surprising neatness, "we won't exchange contact information." I hesitated at Victoria's suggestion, even though I knew it was the safest, most logical step. "But that's against the rules, Victoria. The rules of the service. And frankly, it feels safer." "Yes, I know. But I mean beyond the service. No private email, no personal phone numbers, no social media. No back channels," she clarified. My heart wavered violently. What if something were to happen? What if I desperately wanted to see her again? The magnetic pull of her presence was strong. To be honest, I didn't want to see her again. But I also knew it was dangerous. A risk to everything I was supposed to be going back to. "Let me think about it," I said, stalling, needing a moment to steel myself. "That's right. There's no need to rush, Rob." She respected the space. Checkout time was approaching rapidly. "Shall we go now? The lobby is probably filling up." "Yes, let's go." We left the room, leaving the rumpled bed and the lingering scent of wine and perfume behind. We rode the elevator down. We took the opposite route from last night, a quiet descent from fantasy back into reality. When we arrived in the lobby, Sarah and Andrew were already waiting, standing together near a pillar. They looked calm, perhaps a little tired, but composed. There was an indefinable new energy about Sarah. "Thank you for your hard work, Rob." Andrew greeted me, his hand extended for a firm shake. "Thank you too, Andrew." When I looked at Sarah, something indeed seemed different. Her expression was brighter than usual, a softness around her eyes that hadn't been there the day before. The four of us exchanged polite, brief farewells, nodding to the pact of silence and discretion. We had shared something enormous, yet we parted as polite strangers. Sarah and I walked toward our car, the city traffic now fully roaring around us. The contrast between the hotel room and the busy street was jarring. The drive from the hotel district back to the familiar, tree-lined suburbs felt like a decompression chamber. The silence in the car was heavy, but it wasn't the old, stagnant silence. This one was different. It was thick with unspoken experience, charged with new, mutual understanding. We were both physically present, But emotionally, we were still processing the events of the last 12 hours. I glanced over at Sarah. She was staring out the window, watching the cityscape transition into more familiar residential areas. Her expression was softer, less guarded than usual. There was a faint flush on her cheeks, and her eyes held a spark that hadn't been there the day before. I could tell she wasn't just tired. She was radiating a quiet, internal satisfaction. It was a change I'd spotted in the lobby, magnified by the intimacy of our small car. I had to know. I had to break the pact, just a little, to gauge the depth of her experience, and more importantly, to understand what that experience meant for us. So, I started, my voice careful, trying to sound casual. "How is it, Sarah?" She turned from the window, looking directly at me. "About last night, Rob," she clarified, acknowledging the shared secret. "Yes, just generally speaking. How do you feel?" She took a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Well, it was certainly a new experience," she said, her answer more innocent and straightforward than I had expected. "A shock to the system, really. But mostly, I feel like I learned something fundamental about myself." I was intrigued, but also braced for a flood of details about Andrew, which would violate our pact. But Sarah, ever the rule follower, stayed within the agreed-upon boundaries. "How was it for you, Rob?" "With Victoria?" she counter-asked, her tone genuinely curious, not accusatory. I kept my own response vague, mirroring hers. It was intense. She's a wonderful woman, very perceptive. It was an irreplaceable time for me, too. It reminded me of things I had forgotten. Then came the inevitable question about her partner. "So, how was Andrew, Sarah?" Her answer was warm, and I could hear a note of genuine appreciation in her voice. "Andrew was very gentlemanly, Rob. Very kind and considerate. He was exactly what I had hoped for in that regard." "I see," I mumbled, the words feeling a bit sour. I felt a little pang of jealousy, an irrational, possessive instinct I hadn't realized still existed. My wife, after 2 decades of polite, functional silence, had spent the night with a calm, considerate, and gentlemanly man who had given her an experience I hadn't provided. Sarah caught the subtle shift in my tone. "Rob." I quickly forced a smile. "Nothing. I'm glad you had a positive experience. You deserved it." She didn't let the subject drop, moving directly to the emotional core of the experience. "So, what did it feel like, Rob? What did you discover?" Sarah thought for a long moment, folding her hands neatly in her lap. This was the moment of revelation, the payoff of the risk we'd taken. "It felt like I was treated like a woman for the first time in a long time," she stated simply. Those words hit me like a physical blow. They struck me deeply. As a matter of fact, yes, she wasn't blaming me, but the sheer, understated honesty of the statement was a direct commentary on profound deficit in our own marriage. She hadn't felt like a woman, a desirable, attractive, seen woman, by her own husband, her lifelong partner. The realization brought a rush of shame, followed immediately by self-justification. But she wasn't seeing me as a man either. I voiced my reciprocal truth. "How was it for you, Rob? You also seemed lighter." I felt like I was seen as a man, too. I admitted, not just a manager, a father, or a bill payer. Victoria was so affirming. She seemed to faint over the fact that I was a sincere, strong man. I chose the word faint because that's how it felt, like my most fundamental male qualities were being celebrated. Sarah listened intently, her head slightly tilted. Her smile now seemed brighter than before, and it was aimed at me, not at the memory of Andrew. "I am glad, Rob," she said, taking my hand and giving a quick squeeze. "I really am. It means we both got exactly what we needed out of this crazy idea." After we got home, we returned to our normal lives, the silence of the house once again filling the space around us. But something had fundamentally changed. The house felt less like a tomb of routine and more like a shared, fragile container holding a volatile secret. The exchanges that had been rote for years. "Good work." "Thank you." Now somehow felt fresh. The polite acknowledgement was tinged with the awareness that we both knew what the other was capable of, what desires lay beneath the surface. It was a new tension, a new layer of complexity. That night, at dinner, the conversation was hesitant but real. "What do you think of last night, Rob?" "The whole experience?" Sarah asked, setting down her fork. "Honestly, it was good. More than good. It was exactly the shock I needed." "I liked you, too," Sarah said, her voice soft. I liked Andrew's calm demeanor and the way he talked to me with such focused attention. But I'm also glad it was just once. Her words caught me by surprise. Why, Sarah? Because it was enough. I asked, thinking of my own wavering desire to see Victoria again. Yes, enough for now, she confirmed, because I realized what we were lacking, and I realized it wasn't a different person who needed to fix it. It was us. What was lacking, Sarah? Tell me. Seeing each other as men and women, Rob. That's what was lacking. We became roommates and co-COs of the household. We forgot to be a couple, she concluded, the conviction in her eyes undeniable. Sarah's words resonated with me perfectly. Perhaps that's true. Last night had functioned as a brutal, necessary mirror. Me too, Sarah. I saw you walk into the lobby, and I realized I hadn't looked at you with that kind of nervous anticipation in years. Only when you were about to be with another man did the desire to protect and cherish you, as a woman, flare up. So, from now on, let's change too. Let's cherish each other's changes more. We have to bring the lessons from that hotel room back into this house. Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. Her touch felt different, more deliberate, more meaningful than a simple dinner table gesture. She looked at me, a direct, challenging look. Rob, do you see me as a woman right now? Of course, Sarah. More than ever, I answered, squeezing her hand. And I'll see you as a man, too. The man who was bold enough to even suggest this, and whose hands are always strong and reliable. That night, for the first time in a very long time, we made love. It was different from the experience with Victoria. It wasn't a heady, liberating rush of the forbidden and the new. It was a reclaiming. It was rooted in a deep, familiar love, but now infused with new, rediscovered intentionality. It was an equally precious time, a commitment to rebuilding our intimacy. It's been a long time, Sarah murmured against my chest afterward, sighing contentedly. I know, and I'll cherish it more from now on, too. I promise, Sarah. I realized with a clarity that was both humbling and exhilarating that last night's experience with Victoria had ultimately improved my relationship with Sarah. The external validation we both sought had served its purpose, not as a replacement for our marriage, but as a catalyst for its renewal. A week passed, and life settled back into its rhythms, but those rhythms were undeniably smoother, richer. The air in our home was lighter, the smiles were more genuine, and the casual touches, a hand on the shoulder, a lingering kiss goodbye, had returned. The experience had created an invisible, potent undercurrent of shared understanding between Sarah and me. We were closer than we'd been in years, navigating our days with silent, appreciative acknowledgement of each other's rediscovered depth. I was at work, staring blankly at my computer screen, or rather, pretend to stare at it while contemplating the logistics of a new construction phase, when my personal cell phone buzzed. It wasn't the usual spam or a notification from a news app. It was a message notification from an unfamiliar number. I picked it up, my heart immediately seized with a powerful jolt of recognition and dread. It was from Victoria. The message was short, polite, and dangerously tempting. Thank you for the wonderful time the other day, Rob. It meant a great deal to me. If we ever have the chance, would you like to have dinner together? Just dinner. V. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity, the sterile, blue light of the office monitor reflecting in my eyes. My mind instantly fractured into 1,000 pieces. On one side, there was the Andrew Victoria bubble, the intoxicating memory of validation, the thrill of the forbidden, the beautiful, sensual connection we had forged. My honest, gut reaction was a searing, powerful need to see her again, to talk, to connect, to simply acknowledge that the magic had been real, not just a temporary delusion created by expensive wine and a hotel room. I wanted to accept. I wanted the intellectual companionship, the easy flow of conversation, and the thrilling possibility that just dinner could lead to something more, something that would keep the new, vibrant Rob Miller alive. But on the other side was Sarah, my wife, the person I had committed 24 years to, the person who, through this entire risky process, had shown me an unexpected vulnerability and a profound willingness to fight for our connection. My relationship with Sarah had not just been repaired, it had been fundamentally improved, enriched by the very validation I had sought elsewhere. The thought of jeopardizing that fragile, newly minted happiness was like a cold splash of water. I stared at the message for a long time, the conflict raging inside me. To be honest, I wanted to see her again. The part of me that had felt starved for female appreciation for so long was screaming yes. But I also knew it was dangerous. I had to make a choice between the temporary, exciting fantasy and the deeper, more complex reality of my life. My relationship with Sarah was finally flourishing again. I shouldn't risk ruining it now. I had made a pact, both with Sarah and, more importantly, with myself, to use the experience as a catalyst, not an escape route. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I began to write my reply. I chose my words with agonizing care, trying to convey genuine appreciation without offering a sliver of hope for a future encounter. I wrote back, Victoria, thank you for reaching out, and thank you for the wonderful time the other day. It was an experience I will always value. But I want to treasure that night exactly as it was, a special one-time memory. I need to focus on my marriage now. I wish you all the best. Rob. It was the hardest message I had ever written. It felt like I was deliberately extinguishing a bright flame. I reread it 3 times, making sure it was final, definitive, and yet not unkind. After I pressed send, I felt a tremendous, immediate sense of loneliness. It was a small, hollow ache where the thrill had been. But quickly, that feeling was replaced by a firm resolve and a sense of integrity. I knew it was the right choice. I had respected the boundaries of the experiment, and more importantly, I had respected the renewed commitment to my wife. I deleted the message thread from my phone and put it away, forcing myself to return to construction plans on the screen. The crisis, I thought, was averted. Then, just as I was successfully immersing myself back into the world of blueprints and schedules, Sarah called out from behind me. She had come into my home office without me noticing, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. What are you doing, Rob? You look like you're contemplating the meaning of life on your phone. I jumped, guilt instantly flooding my system. I fumbled the phone, catching it just before it hit the floor. The simple, physical reaction betrayed my secret. I was looking at my email. I stammered, cursing my lack of composure. She gave me a long, penetrating look. The gentle, bright expression I had seen since the weekend was replaced by a momentary, sharp assessment. A personal email or work? I made a split-second decision. I had to be honest. This was the foundation of our new bond. I couldn't lie now, not over something this important. Not work. Sarah, another me. I answered honestly, handing her the phone with the deleted message history visible, pointing to the general notification that had appeared moments before she entered. Victoria sent a message. She said she wanted to see me again. For dinner. Sarah put her hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was surprisingly steady and non-judgmental. She picked up the phone, looking at the screen and then back at me. How did you respond, Rob? She asked, her voice calm, waiting for my answer. I said no, Sarah. I told her I wanted to treasure that night as a memory and that I was focusing on my marriage. Sarah didn't speak for a few seconds. She kept her hand on my shoulder, and I could feel the gentle, rhythmic pressure of her fingers. I was waiting for praise, for relief, for anything. Instead, she asked another question that showed the new, incredible depth of her thought process. Why did you make that choice, Rob? Tell me honestly. Was it because you felt obligated to me, or because you genuinely wanted to? I chose my words carefully, looking directly into her eyes. I said no, because I genuinely wanted to. The experience of Victoria was amazing, truly validating, but it was a mirror. It showed me what I was missing and what I was capable of. And when I came home and we reconnected, Sarah, I realized that what I truly miss, the deeper connection, the love, the partnership, is right here. The risk of ruining this new foundation we built, the honesty we finally found, just isn't worth any dinner, no matter how tempting. Sarah's eyes softened and a beautiful, heartfelt smile spread across her face. She pulled me toward her and embraced me tightly. Thank you, Rob, she murmured into my neck. I am so grateful for your sincerity. Then she pulled back slightly, looking thoughtful. But if you had said you wanted to see her, I wouldn't have stopped you. Not entirely. Her words surprised me again. You wouldn't have? Why would you say that? Because it would have been a reflection of how much our relationship still needed to improve, she explained. It would have told me that I needed to step up more, be more present, and see you more clearly. The fact that you said no, and that your internal focus has shifted back to us, is the ultimate proof that the entire crazy, scary experience worked. I felt a surge of love for this complicated, insightful woman. But you're still the most important thing to me, Sarah. You were always the end goal, not the obstacle. And Rob, you are the most important thing to me too, she affirmed. We embraced again, the coffee forgotten. The couple switch experience had taught us many things. It had forced us to confront the importance of each other, the charm of being a man and a woman to one's partner, and the true shape of love in a long-term marriage. It wasn't about fireworks every day. It was about mutual acknowledgement and consistent effort. That night, exactly 1 week after our adventure, became an important page in our lives, not because of the adventure itself, but because it marked a point where we chose a hard, fulfilling road of commitment over the easy, exciting path of fantasy. We will continue to cherish each other, not in spite of our shared secret, but because of it. The rejection of Victoria's invitation and the subsequent conversation with Sarah marked the definitive end of the couple's switch chapter and the true beginning of our renewed marriage. It wasn't just a physical reconnection. It was a shift in our entire emotional architecture. The most profound realization that emerged from the experience was the understanding of the niche we had neglected in our own relationship. We had been so focused on our roles, the successful professional, the competent parent, the stable life partner, that we had utterly failed to tend to the man-woman niche. We discovered that the specific, deeply personal area of connection required its own distinct kind of attention, validation, and vulnerability, separate from the broader category of family love. Sarah and I began to implement the lessons in small, actionable ways. It wasn't about planning grand, expensive gestures. It was about intentionality. For Sarah, this meant deliberately seeking my affirmation as a man. She started asking about my work not just to monitor my stress levels, but to genuinely admire my competence. When I fixed something around the house, a leaky faucet, a flickering light, she wouldn't just say, "Thanks." She'd stop, look at my hands, and say, "You're so good at this, Rob." It's comforting to have a man who can handle things. That simple, authentic acknowledgement of my masculinity made me stand a little taller. For me, the change was about seeing Sarah. I started paying attention to her clothes, her hair, the subtle ways she took care of herself. I would compliment her, not with generic platitude, but with specifics. "That new color looks fantastic on you." Or, "You have a beautiful, elegant composure when you're focused." It was about validating her femininity, making her feel seen as a desirable woman, not just a tireless manager of our home life. We even started to explore the mechanics of our attraction. We had both been surprised by what we sought in the exchange partners. Sarah's desire for a man who seemed honest and clean, Andrew, and my attraction to a woman who was confident and sensual, Victoria. We realized these attributes were precisely what we felt had gone missing in ourselves and in each other. Andrew represented the respectful, deliberate attention Sarah craved, and Victoria represented the unapologetic, vibrant femininity I missed seeing in my world. Now, instead of seeking those qualities externally, we challenged ourselves to cultivate them internally. Sarah started dressing with more intention, embracing that self-possessed elegance that she admired in Victoria. I, in turn, worked harder at being a patient, deliberate conversationalist, trying to emulate the gentlemanly calm that Andrew had apparently embodied. The ultimate irony was that the exchange became an exercise in self-improvement for the sake of the partnership. We started scheduling date nights. And I don't mean dinner and a movie. I mean time dedicated to connecting as a man and a woman. We would explicitly leave our parent and professional roles at the door. We'd talk about passions, dreams, and even our shared memories of dating, trying to resurrect the emotional and intellectual thrill of when we were getting to know each other. The goal was to remember the fun of being a couple. The memory of the hotel night didn't vanish, of course. It lingered like a strong, complex flavor, but its meaning fundamentally shifted. It stopped being a painful comparison and became a touchstone, a reminder of the lowest point our marriage reached and the powerful lesson we learned. It was the moment we recognized the rot and decided to apply the antidote. One evening, Sarah and I were having wine on the back patio, enjoying the quiet of the evening. "You know, Rob," Sarah said, swirling her glass, "I was talking to a colleague at work today. She's younger, maybe early 40s, and she was complaining about her marriage. Just that feeling of being taken for granted, of being invisible. And what did you tell her?" I asked, already knowing the complexity of the answer. Sarah smiled a little sadly. "I didn't tell her about our weekend, obviously, but I told her that invisibility is a shared responsibility. I told her that if you feel unseen, you have to be brave enough to either demand to be seen or make the radical choice to step out of the shadows. And sometimes," she paused, looking at me with great warmth, "sometimes you need a shared shock to the system to realize how much you actually cherish the person you already have." She put her hand on my knee. "The thing I'm most grateful for, Rob, isn't the experience with Andrew. It's the moment you chose us. You chose the slow, difficult work of rebuilding over the easy, exciting promise of a fantasy that showed me your commitment in a way 20 years of routine never could." Her words were a final, powerful affirmation that the experiment, in its totality, had been a success. It had been the most terrifying, rewarding, and effective marital counseling imaginable. At 52, I had discovered a new form of love, one that was not passive and assumed, but active and chosen daily. And I learned that sometimes the true value of your own life and your own partner can only be seen clearly through the lens of someone else's desire. The weeks that followed the couple switch became a period of quiet, shared reflection. We both found ourselves frequently revisiting the language and the concepts we encounter on the surface. Terms like niche, identity verification, and mutual consent, but applying them, ironically, to the landscape of our own long-term marriage. We realized that our primary niche as a couple had narrowed almost exclusively to shared logistics and parallel careers. We were excellent co-COS of the Miller household, but terrible lovers. The hotel night forced us to actively cultivate the man-woman niche that had atrophied through neglect. It wasn't about the act of swapping, but the permission it granted us to prioritize that missing aspect of our connection without guilt or professional restraint. I spent time thinking about Andrew. Sarah had described him as gentlemanly, calm, and considerate. I had initially felt a stab of competitive inadequacy, but I soon realized Andrew had simply provided Sarah with a space where her needs for respectful attention were paramount. He wasn't a better man. He was just a new man operating under an extremely specific, temporary contract. His role was to validate her as a woman, and in doing so, he showed me the very thing I had stopped providing. The lesson was, gentlemanly conduct is a choice, not a personality trait, and I could make that choice for Sarah every day. Sarah, too, reflected on Victoria. She was beautiful, confident, and unapologetic about her desire. Sarah realized that the sheer novelty of Victoria's presence forced me to see the woman beneath the wife. It spurred me to be bold, to take the lead, and to seek validation as a man. Victoria's greatest gift to me wasn't intimacy. It was permission to be a hunter again, to pursue and be appreciated. Sarah's insight was powerful. I can be that woman for Rob. I just need to choose to step into that confidence more often. We talk about the concept of mutual consent outside of the exchange itself. We realized we had been living in a state of assumed consent for years. We assumed the other was happy. We assumed the intimacy would just happen. We assumed the love was enough. The experience taught us that true, active consent in all areas of life, not just physical intimacy, requires constant verbal renewal. It means checking in, asking questions, and never taking the other person's happiness or presence for granted. Our renewed intimacy reflected this. It wasn't simply more frequent. It was characterized by active communication and a heightened sense of presence. We spoke more about what we wanted and needed, both physically and emotionally. The difference was palpable. Our lovemaking had transformed from predictable, hurried obligation into a joyful, conversational ritual. I often think about the moment I pressed send on that message to Victoria. It was the hardest thing I had to do because it meant willingly choosing the difficult, rewarding path of reality over the effortless, seductive path of fantasy. It was a choice that cemented the value of my marriage. At 52, I understood that long-term love is not a passive state of enduring familiarity. It is an active creation. It requires the same level of intentionality, vetting, and boundary setting that we had applied to the couple switch. The boundaries were now internal. The boundary against taking each other for granted, the boundary against slipping back into the co-CO roles, and the boundary protecting our vital, shared vulnerability. I learned that you can find the thrill of the new not by finding a new person, but by seeing your old person through new eyes. And sometimes you need a radical, external force to polish the lens. The experience ultimately made us better, not just as partners, but as individuals. Sarah found her lost confidence and self-possessed grace. I found my ability to lead with sincerity and gentleness. We both rediscovered the primal desire to be wanted, and we learned that the most fulfilling source of that validation was always right beside us, waiting to be truly seen. And so, here we are, back in the present day. I'm Rob Miller, 52 years old, and I'm standing here today telling you a story that, just a few months ago, I would have sworn I'd take to the grave. This has been the most challenging, embarrassing, and ultimately rewarding chapter in my life. The couple switch experience, this unbelievable, consented detour, didn't shatter our marriage. It did the opposite. It saved it. It gave Sarah and me the jolt of electricity we needed to break the inertia of 2 decades of polite, functional cohabitation. We learned that the right thing isn't always a predictable thing, and that sometimes you have to embrace a little insanity to regain your sanity. The quiet revolution in our home continues. Our dialogue is open. Our affection is intentional. We now have a shared secret, a kind of marital war story that only we understand. It's a testament to our willingness to go to the extreme edge of our boundaries, not to escape each other, but to find a way back to each other. I've come to understand that love, in its long-term form, is a choice to keep seeing and pursuing your partner, even after you think you know every page of their story. Our journey taught us that stagnation is a true enemy of a long-term relationship, far more insidious than conflict. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference, and we were dangerously close to it. I look at Sarah now, and I see the woman who had the courage to say, "Let's try it." I see the elegance, the intelligence, and the deep emotional capacity she had under years of domestic routine. I see the woman I chased, and I continue to chase her, but now I'm chasing her with a full awareness of what I could lose if I stopped trying. And Sarah, she looks at me, and I know she sees more than just a site supervisor. She sees a man who was vulnerable enough to admit his needs, bold enough to propose the unthinkable, and ultimately grounded enough to choose his commitment over an easy temptation. She sees me, Rob, the man, the partner, the one whose hands are trained through work, and who is still capable of being seen and appreciated. The message from Victoria remains deleted, but the lesson she imparted lives on. She served her purpose perfectly. She validated a starving man, and in doing so, she gave him the strength to return home and demand the validation he truly needed from the woman who truly mattered. At 52, I didn't just discover a new form of love. I learned that love, when it gets old, can sometimes be seen most clearly through other people's eyes. It took a consensual stranger in a hotel room to remind me who my wife was, and who I was supposed to be for her. This is the end of the story of our couple switch. It's a messy, unconventional, and deeply personal chapter, but it's an honest one. And I hope that sharing it, breaking the silence around the reality of long-term marriages, helps some of you out there who might be staring at your phone in the middle of the night, feeling that same quiet dread. The lesson? Don't wait for the extreme measure. Don't wait for the niche to be so broken that you have to take a terrifying risk to fix it. Do the small, brave, intentional work every single day. Thank you for listening to my story. Every day, this channel posts heartwarming and sometimes challenging adult love stories for those of us who are navigating the complexities of middle and later life. Please subscribe and like the channel. It honestly encourages us to continue creating and sharing these deeply personal narratives. We're all in this wild ride of life and love together. Please also take a look at our past videos for more unconventional love stories. See you tomorrow.